Yes. Well, it is a pleasure to be here with all of you, and I have no prepared remarks. I'm just going to speak really from the heart. That it is an absolute pleasure to be back with S.U.N, with all of you, to have a conversation about our city and our communities, and in particular, the interests and the aspirations of Scarborough residents. I had a very unique experience as a city councillor last year, because as you know, many city councillors, we were just having a conversation about this, rarely have an opportunity to leave the confines and the boundaries of their own ward and really understand the needs and the issues and the focuses of communities throughout our very, very large city. And when I ran for mayor, there's so many things about that experience that I valued. But there was nothing more important to me than the opportunity to go into different neighborhoods and listen to people and go for walks with people and learn from them, given the fact that all of us at City Council will end up voting on most of these issues, but very few of us will have any idea where they are or have an understanding from the people who live there about how it affects their lives. So for me, I personally benefited and professionally benefited from the experience of being able to come to Scarborough so many times to meet with you. And in fact, many of the lessons that I learned from you ended up on my platform itself as I advocated for better transit for Scarborough, for better rail paths for Scarborough, for better active transportation along those paths, to finally get the busway built for Scarborough residents, and also understanding the needs of social services and development and planning that really leaves the community better than it was found in the first place, rather than having to react to every development proposal as it comes. So I'll conclude by saying that I also don't believe that just when you're running for election should be the time that you come and knock at somebody's door and listen to them. And that's why, as I remain a local city councillor in Midtown Toronto, I don't intend to simply just come here whenever I run for mayor, and who knows if that'll happen again or not. But I do want to continue this relationship because you are part of my wider community in the city of Toronto. I built a relationship with Scarborough that I care deeply about, and I look forward to supporting your many causes and many aspirations as we move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh, right? Josh is good?
Yes.
Okay. So we got a packed agenda here. We're gonna go on, start off with social services, with Lee Soda at Agincourt Community Centers, then Guled Arale at S.U.N, and Rhoda Potter from Agincourt Village Community Association. So, go ahead, Rhoda. Sorry.
Lee. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor, for coming to Scarborough. We appreciate it. I'm Lee Soda. I'm the Executive Director at Agincourt Community Services. I've been with the agency since 1999, and I am a resident of Scarborough, Agincourt, for the past 30 some odd years. So this is home. This is home for me personally, as well as in my work life. I care about my community. I've raised my family here. I'm going to not inundate you with a whole bunch of statistics, but I'm going to tell you that the work of the agency is really embedded in the social fabric of Scarborough. We are here to support those that are struggling, and struggle comes in many different forms. We have programs for those experiencing homelessness, are underhoused. Someday I'd like to talk to you about multi-tenant housing that is going to be rolling out in our communities as well. We are an agency that works with families and children, newcomers, but at the common denominator of everyone that we serve, they are residents of our city, of our communities, that are in moments in time in their lives where they are struggling. And I will throw some stats at you. AVCA is witnessing firsthand the growing and deepening vulnerability of our Canadian households as the affordability crisis in our city continues to deepen. with 1 in 3 Canadians overall and 1 in 2 Canadians with incomes under $50,000 saying that they're now in either terrible or bad shape financially, with 67% of Canadians having to cut back on discretionary spending, with 40% of individuals having to draw on their savings, 13% are borrowing from friends and family, and 8% have taken out a bank loan to make ends meet. I can share with you some horrifying statistics that speak to 11,000 people are coming to our food center monthly. 11,000 households. That's over 23,000 individuals, right? And these are not just homeless folks, these are working poor in our city. And they are struggling to make ends meet when, after they pay their rent or their mortgages, there's little to nothing left over for everything else. So these are, these are folks that look like you and I that are coming and having to endure long lineups. AVCA has a plethora of programs, and street outreach is something that we also do, with 2 street outreach vans with 2 teams, all right, covering all of Scarborough from Pickering, right over to Jane Street in North York. Steeles to the north, and the lake down, and the lake being the most south. Impossible work. And on a monthly basis, we get over 360 CCCs. CCCs are concerned citizen calls of people like you and I who are invested citizens in our city, calling the agency, the street outreach, to call about concerns that they're seeing on their streets, panhandlers, people sleeping where they shouldn't be sleeping. And this, of course, now I'm leading into a conversation about our homeless situation, which is no longer a downtown issue. It is now very much embedded within our Scarborough communities. It is no longer hidden. It used to be a hidden thing in Scarborough. They used to say that they used to come out here to cottage in Scarborough because of all of our parklands out here. And so it's just a lot more hidden. It isn't hidden anymore. It's out in the open as it is downtown, and we are struggling. There's a struggle bus out here that is full. And most of the folks that are living outside because we try on a daily basis and can spend up to 4 to 5 hours with Central Intake, a City of Toronto system, trying to find people a bed on any given night. And we cannot. So essentially, when we close our doors at night, we know that we are leaving people to sleep outside. There are simply not enough shelter beds to accommodate the number of people who are experiencing homelessness in our city. Along with the homelessness crisis and the shelter crisis, what has happened in Scarborough in particular, because we're talking about Scarborough, since COVID, since the pandemic, there has been a pushing northward into our suburbs, our downtown problems, which is the gentrification of downtown is pushing people into our suburbs. And therefore, Scarborough is experiencing today what would typically be seen as issues that were going on downtown. We are not NIMBYs here. We aren't talking about keep them downtown, put them somewhere else. We are talking about a city that is growing and expanding, and we understand that. But what has not happened is that the infrastructure has not kept up with what is happening in our suburbs, Scarborough mainly. So the poverty is being pushed into our suburbs, right? The homelessness is a lot more evident. The housing crisis is just unbelievable. And the shelter system can't keep up with housing all of the folks on any given night. And it is deepening in Scarborough, and we do not have the infrastructure, nor have we had the investments made in Scarborough to be able to deal with the changes that are happening out here. The City of Toronto funds AVCA Community Services with several programs, but it simply is not enough. And when you don't have your infrastructure keeping up with the challenges, there are big problems that we are experiencing. Things that I'm sure that you have heard, our customers, our patrons, our participants are struggling with soaring inflation, rising costs at the fuel pumps, food insecurity due obviously to the high cost of food, increased rents and above guideline increases from landlords, loss of employment and reduced work hours, inability to meet even the most basic of needs because of the OW and ODSP rates having been flatlined for decades. And then of course there is the addiction and mental health challenges of which public health has not yet come out here to Scarborough to address and talk to people like us who see these issues firsthand and need far more public health investment out here in Scarborough to deal with the increased drug and mental health addictions. Obviously there's family breakdowns, and of course there's always physical health challenges. I'm gonna hit you with a few more stats. 1 in 10 people in Toronto are now accessing food banks. Last year in 2022, the number was 1 in 20. 1 in 4 of our children are going to school hungry. There are 57% of the clients that we have spoken to are first-time food bank users, right? So not lifers having to access a food bank for the first time ever. And I know I'm probably blowing over my time, so poverty, equitable access to service is no longer a downtown issue. It is very much alive out here in Scarborough. Agencies like AVCA Community Services, our job is to make sure that everybody is okay and has access to supports and services, not just some. And we need to have far more investments in our Scarborough communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Guled?
Alright. Yeah, so my name is Guled. We've met multiple times. I've been engaged in civic politics, like advocating for like 12 years over a decade now. And it's kind of really amazing to see that, you know, for the first time in 14 years, instead of fighting to protect services, we actually have an opportunity to invest in Scarborough and invest in services in our city. So that change of pace and this opportunity kind of is time to make up for last 14 years of lacks of investments, but also to help build the city that we all want to see. Especially here in Scarborough, I think we kind of definitely talked about how the inequalities in our city is very much they lies a lot. The problems with the inequalities in our city kind of fall into beats in suburbs like Scarborough. And people kind of think Scarborough is just kind of like a small part of the city, but if Scarborough was its own city, it would be in the top 5 cities of all of Canada, comparable size to Mississauga and Winnipeg. So this is a huge area with a huge population that's been traditionally underserved and had a huge lack of investments. And we kind of see from when you go to Victoria Park, from east to west, the lack of the city services that are offered is night and day in terms of the services. So yeah, so now's the opportunity to kind of reverse course and really invest in Toronto, but especially in Scarborough. So Scarborough Civic Action Network is a community-driven network that aims to support civic engagement to address the inequalities that we here in Scarborough are facing, and to be a civic voice for Scarborough, and strive for a prosperous, livable Scarborough for all. We're housed under AVCA, but we represent all of Scarborough, and try to get the concerns of residents dealt with at City Hall. Housing and community safety are kind of 2 of our mandates, but we kind of also try to work and engage in anything that's might impact Scarborough at City Hall. So it's really great to see that the Scarborough Busway was finally funded. I know you sit on the TTC board, so you know how
I've been pushing for it too.
You have been pushing for it, so thank you so much for being an advocate. It's unfortunate that TTC kind of mismanaged that project, and it's going to take a few years, so anything you can continue to do to advocate to kind of make it, to push up the timeline even more would definitely be greatly appreciated. But yeah, just kind of like building on some of the housing stuff. I know you sit on the Housing and Planning Committee, so it's really great to see that the Hamilton bylaws, the renovation bylaw, was something that the Housing and Planning Committee kind of moved and tried to push forward. Because housing is probably the number one issue most people in the city are facing, the high cost of housing. And unfortunately, we have so much bad faith landlords that use renovations in order to kick out the tenant, just so they could put it back on the market for higher rents. So it's really great to see Hamilton kind of take that huge step forward. So for people who don't know, what Hamilton passed is a bylaw that requires landlords to register with the city, get a third-party engineering report, and register with the city that they actually kicked somebody out to renovate the unit. And then that way, it will kind of create an extra level of scrutiny to ensure that these bad faith landlords are not just pushing people up just to increase the rent. So it's definitely great to see that it's moving forward here in the city of Toronto. So hopefully we can make sure it has teeth, just so we can close this loophole, because I think almost everyone knows somebody who's being renovated in the city, and it's definitely a major contributor to the housing crisis.
Just to add, if I may, we both want to learn from what Hamilton has done. We hope that it stands and that it's not repealed. And we also need to focus on fraudulent use of landlord-owned use, where many landlords will say, my daughter or somebody is going to move in. That's not the case, and then they're really just trying to up the rent and have it vacant. So there's a number of focuses that we need to
exactly. And I think also like one of the more important pieces is the right to return. Because a lot of people don't even know their rights, that when after the renovation is done, then the tenant has the right to return for the same rents that they had before the renovation. So definitely that piece and the other pieces is definitely really important. So it's really good to see like a lot of movement happening with this. When it comes to safety, I think one of the things that we kind of want to learn from is the Regent Park social development plan. They went the entire year last year without any shooting deaths, and this is that kind of program is something that we feel that can be replicated in different neighborhoods in the city, especially here in Scarborough. And it's not that even big an investment to hopefully see something that can be replicated in different neighborhoods throughout the city. So I think like those are the two major pieces that we want to kind of work on for now. And hopefully, I know especially you being on the Planning and Housing Committee, you can definitely work closer on that. And anything you can kind of do in order to, because I know the mayor's office did indicate support about replicating the Regent Park Social Development Plan to different parts of the city. So anything in the future that you might be able to advocate with that'd be really amazing.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Guled. And also, Rhoda is going to speak.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Rhoda Potter, and I'm president of Agincourt Village Community Association, but working with Ron and Alan to help to develop the Scarborough United Neighbourhoods, because as we come together, we're more powerful as we work together and learn about each other. I've lived in Scarborough for 47 years, and I live very close to what used to be the most eloquent hotel in Scarborough, the Delta Hotel at the 401 in Kennedy. I want to preface my comments to make sure that you understand that we understand the city's in a situation as far as housing and as far as the shelter issues. We have 2,200 unhoused people being housed in hotels in Toronto. However, 7 of the 17 Toronto hotels being used are in Scarborough, and the 8th is very close proximity just west of Victoria Park at the DVP. We have no hotels in Scarborough where anyone can stay if you're a tourist, if you're a parent of children that are in hockey tournaments, soccer tournaments, etc. And we will not be ready for the FIFA games in 2026. Negative impact on Scarborough is tremendous as far as the businesses are concerned, because people are going elsewhere to stay overnight, to go to restaurants. They're going to Pickering, they're going to Markham, and we have evidence of that. The cost per person to house a person in a hotel setting, an unhoused person in a hotel setting, is $263 per day. Multiply that times 365 days per year. Multiply that by 5 more years of the leases for the hotels. 400 of the 2,200 unhoused people are being housed at the Delta shelter in an unhealthy, unsafe shelter situation, confined by 9 high-rise condominiums with only one exit to a very busy street on Kennedy Road. Crime within 1 kilometer of the Delta shelter in 2023 went up by 37%. At City Council on February the 7th, 2024, a motion was passed to extend hotel leases for another 5 years. We'd expected that the Delta the contract would be up this summer. It's been 2 years since COVID. We understood during COVID. But due to over 500 emails that were sent in by residents, the support from S.U.N and other people throughout Scarborough, my deputation and a motion put forward by Councillor Mantis, the council then passed a motion for the Delta lease to be completed in December 2025, with some actions to take place during that time. Immediately, 24/7 duty police officers were positioned and are positioned now in the Delta Hotel. Maybe the city is finally listening to what the community has been saying, because we've lost our Tim Hortons, we may lose our grocery store, our small businesses have hired extra security, we have not been given, our community police officers were taken away. The resource response was taken away just before COVID actually. So, Scarborough is in need of more social, as mentioned, more affordable housing, more community response officers, and business supports within our community. Something that Lee and Guled have also mentioned. That's what we need in Scarborough. We're not saying we have supported the unhoused, we support people that need extra help, but the community also needs extra help to be safe, and we don't feel that we've received the extra supports that are needed given the needs that are here.
Thanks, Rhoda. So we're going to go to another topic that's really hot on the list, and that's transportation services. We have Filip from TTC Riders, who's going to talk about TTC.
Hi everyone, my name is Filip, and I'm Public Policy Undergraduate over at TTC.
So you have to speak up more.
Sorry, my name is Filip. I'm here on behalf of TTC Riders. I'm over at TTC as a student. I'm graduating really soon, so I live in the area. I use transit in the area. I wanted to start by thanking you, Councillor Matlow, as well as Councillor Ainsley, for your support towards TTC Riders' efforts to get Scarborough the Line 3 busway on the former Line 3 corridor. You've had Scarborough commuters' backs from the very beginning when you initially pushed the motion in 2021, all the way to your recent inquiry into the safe repair of Line 3. If anyone here hasn't heard of our group, TTC Riders is an advocacy group for better public transit in Toronto. And before I get started into the 2 main issues I wanted to talk about, I wanted to mention, I understand that Scarborough United is interested in noise reduction initiatives across the city, and I wanted to briefly mention how effective public transit might be for reducing noise along roadways. So road traffic is the biggest culprit of noise pollution by far. I can cite a study here I brought one over from the European Environmental Agency, but I think it's pretty obvious to everyone here. Obviously, battery electric vehicles in the long term will reduce this for speed limits like under 50 when compared to internal combustion engine vehicles. But another major way in which better transit can limit the constant road traffic is by limiting the total amount of vehicles on the road. If there are less people driving cars and more people using transit for various local commutes or various commutes for longer term ones, this reduces the total amount of engines running on the road at any particular amount of times. And this is where some of our various campaigns for policies like commercial parking levy, which I wanted to mention, to fund TTC operational costs come in order to create better, more reliable transit. And so the aforementioned tool I wanted to bring up to you was we've been heavily championing a commercial parking levy. That is to say, municipal levy on lots greater than a specified amount of square meters, or about 10 spaces, I believe, the city of Montreal's rule right now. And obviously this would largely fall from mall parking lots. Toronto's past reports on this proposed levy have estimated this could raise millions of dollars in revenue. Benefits obviously are that you don't have to rely on provincial or federal purse strings for extra funding to keep TTC operational. And owners of large mall parking lots would either choose to devolve the cost of parking likely to consumers, or they choose to sell to developers, which you get the benefit of the density, although I know that's kind of controversial, but around regional hubs, it's a good thing. Some regional hub like STC connecting to Kennedy. For small businesses in Scarborough, I understand this levy is a controversial thing, but I don't think it's something that needs to be afraid of, that small businesses need to be afraid of. The explicit targeting of larger lots prevents the taxing of smaller lots, such as those of the strip malls that contain most of Scarborough's small businesses. By instituting a levy on large lots of wealthier stores and malls, like large properties owned by companies like Cadillac Fairview, the consequent restriction of free parking will level the playing field for small businesses. Consumers will be induced to go to free lots for smaller businesses rather than go and pay the devolved cost of the mall's new pay to park lot. Lots can also be exempted by a classification system where only some areas are specifically chosen for consumer parking. And you can set a minimum threshold. This is something the city of Montreal has also done. So like first 300 square meters, you don't pay for, at least depending on the type of business. And for the former exclusion, you can choose to see whether, does this business house their vehicle fleet on the area, or not, and you wouldn't pay for that. And mostly what I'm asking is that Councillor Matlow, as well as residents at this meeting, would further consider promoting such a levy. And I understand Agincourt Village Community Association has had recent concerns around proposed complete street infrastructure being built around the Village Green area. I think a levy would not only provide extra revenue for such projects, but also pair extremely well with them, because a complete street induces both consumption from pedestrian consumers as well as people who are driving into the area. My second major issue, I have extra time, was mostly just to bring up the Eglinton East LRT, because I understand you've also been bringing up a lot of.
That was also my platform, yes.
Yes. With providing Scarborough with higher order transit obviously is like very important to not just TTC riders, but also me as a resident, especially the decision to end up decommissioning a line we've had for almost 40 years now. And I think also the issue I wanted to bring up in relation to community of Agincourt again is that the proposed terminal Shepherd subway station, in relation to that, is that connecting the ELRT from UGC to Shepherd and ideally across Melbourne over to said terminal station would greatly enhance connectivity to this area. And this is a project that both TTC riders and McKelvey have worked to keep alive as a topic in past council meetings. Bring up the specific one, and mostly just asking that I'm eager to see continued support for this project from both you and ideally other organizations that might be here.
Thanks, Philip.
So,
Sorry, already finished? Oh, okay, so, just to add to that, I was getting lots of feedback in Scarborough related to TTC and parking. And the city has gone with our public land, it's gone for development. I see a 2444 Eglinton, it's turned into some affordable stuff, which is great. The questions that are coming out from the people that are parking there is where are we gonna park after, because they wanna get the TTC. So it's an oxymoron thing. You want people to take transit, but if they don't take their car and they start driving again, we're gonna keep the roads filled up. So in Cambridge, you probably heard in Cambridge, in their town, they had public parking. They got rid of it and built a condo, but underneath they put public parking. Yeah, so this is where you get out of the box thinking and say, you can do both. And you still, if it's a transit-oriented community, the community is also outside that community, which wants to get into the community. The way Scarborough is with transit right now, that's not gonna change until it does change. So there's a long-term goal there, but the short-term goal is how are people gonna use the ride? Otherwise, people are gonna go and get stuck downtown and complain. So just a point on that part of it is, you need to, have your towers, have affordable, that's great, but you also need to get the cars off the road. And that's a perfect place to have it. So they go and they take the Eglinton East, the Eglinton Crosstown, the Metrolinx, or the Kennedy Station. So something for council to think about too on that one. And thanks, Filip, for all your contribution. We're gonna go next to Rhoda. Again, She's so busy up in the
I
Agincourt.
get to talk about Metrolinx. What is there to say about Metrolinx?
Metro no links?
Some people call them Metrolize, but
Oh.
anyway. Agincourt Community, Village Community Association began because of Metrolinx. And we've always said we need more transit, we endorse more trains on the Stouffville corridor. Absolutely. It's 27 minutes from Agincourt GO Station to downtown. Fabulous. However, what Metrolinx proposed was doubling the transit, the tracks. We have 7 schools in Scarborough that are on the east side of the tracks, but they live on the west side of the tracks. And Metrolinx wanted to cut off their access for safety reasons. They would then have to walk over 2 kilometers to get to school. So we fought for a north tunnel, which is on the north end of the brand new Agincourt GO Station. That's how we started. Safety was a huge, huge issue for us when we started. And we began a relationship in 2015 at a community meeting regarding the regional expansion rail. And specifically for us, it was about the double tracking of Stouffville corridor, because it was cutting Agincourt, our community, directly in half. It began with Metrolinx expecting 24 attendees. We knew that because they had 24 bottles of water. There were over 200 in attendance. When you have an issue in Scarborough people come out, and they did. And safety was our issue. And let me preface with the statement that Scarborough needs more transit. We never said stop the trains. We were just looking at safety and how is this going to connect to the TTC? How will people be able to move around easily? However, safety is a huge, huge issue on the Stouffville corridor because of the at-grade crossings. And this is something that the city needs to be working with Metrolinx about. If trains are running at 15-minute intervals at grade crossings, that increases your risk assessment, especially at Danforth and Midland, at Passmore, at Finch, at Huntingwood, at Havendale, and at Progress. Those are 6 street crossings. We were able to get the tunnel, and yes, Steeles now has grade separation. That has just been completed. Working to make Metrolinx accountable has been a task. We're still working on that. Specifically, the noise walls that we were promised in Agincourt, because we're the most residential section of that Stouffville corridor. Most of it is industrial, except around the Kennedy station. But for us, between Finch and Shepherd, it's all residential. We lost property, we lost trees, the whole bit. However, we were happy with that except for the noise. So we were promised noise walls. Noise walls that were put in that are not built to the specifications that Metrolinx put out. They're not built to the height that Metrolinx put in their specifications. So we are still working on that. Also, Agincourt GO Station, which is brand new, we call it our big ice cube, lights up at night, is not open after 11:45 a.m. in the morning. We do not have evening trains, so people that don't work the 9 to 5 timeline cannot get home at night, unless they take TTC, which takes an hour and a half. From Agincourt GO Station, check it out on Wayfair. Agincourt GO Station to downtown, an hour and a half on TTC versus 27 minutes on GO Transit. Trains are often canceled, so they can't depend on the train. We want to get the cars off the street, but they can't depend on that. And so many times I have met people get off the TTC bus at the bottom of the hill because the station is not accessible. If you have a wheelchair, pushing a stroller, handicapped in any way, you have to hike it up the hill to get to the GO Station from where the TTC stop is. Not good planning, but that's what we're dealing with. We need to be able to make these 2 modes of transit connect with each other and connect easily with each other. Metrolinx is overseeing the Eglinton Crosstown. That's debatable. but Scarborough must keep Metrolinx to account. McCowan Station, the subway station being built at McCowan and Shepherd, is being built again with no parking. In Scarborough, our Scarborough communities and neighborhoods are built differently. They're built as cul-de-sacs. You have to walk, for instance, I have neighbors at Finch and Kennedy. They can see where the Finch station will eventually go in, but to get to that station, it's 2 kilometers to walk out to Kennedy, north to Finch, and back to the station. That's what we're dealing with. So in the interim, at least, we need those parking spots at the subway stations so we can access. Otherwise, we're waiting on a bus that are crowded or don't appear or have long interval times between them. That station at McCowan is the only end-of-the-line subway station in Toronto that will not have parking. Every other one has parking at the end. After the subway, the Shepherd subway, between McCowan and Don Mills, discussions, plans and cancellations since 1986. That's when we started talking about the Shepherd extension and the Shepherd subway. Part of it was put in to Don Mills. It stops there. People get off, wait for a bus, get on a bus to continue further east or continue north. Now Metrolinx is building a business case in order to look at the Shepherd subway extension, and that has to do with the pamphlets that I've handed out here. Scarborough maybe by 2030, maybe we'll have 5 subway stops. Right now, North York has 21 subway stops, plus many GO stations within their community. Right now, on Shepherd at Victoria Park area, we have a development called Consumers Next, which will be a huge condominium development, but it also employs, I think it's 1,800 employees. 18,000 employees, thank you.
Probably close to 19 now.
6,000 of those are Scarborough residents who are employed there. It's the second largest employment node in the GTA. Doesn't it deserve some public transit? We also have within 800 kilometers of all of the intersections between Yonge Street and McCowan, within 800 kilometers, within walking distance, between Yonge and McCowan, presently we have a population of about 155,000 right now at each of those intersections. That's not including the communities around. That's definitely at the intersections. That's projected to be 250,000 plus. That's 100,000 more than what we have there now. But we have no public transit other than buses that sit in traffic on 2 lanes of a highway where the bus doesn't even pull out and the traffic stops. That's what we're involved with. We need that public, we need the loop. We need to continue the loop of the subway. But we also need the Eglinton Crosstown to open. We need the Eglinton East LRT to connect to all of this. We need that Scarborough extension. We need the Shepherd extension. We need the Lakeshore East to continue to run. And we need more trains to happen on the Stoughville corridor. They need to connect to each other, and they need to connect to TTC. We really have needs.
Thanks, Rhoda. Next is Safe Roads with Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Schmidt with Toronto East Cyclists. We began as a group of folks in the community in Scarborough Southwest when bike lanes were taken out of Pharmacy and Birchmount. We recognized the way the city did those projects was they were done poorly. We also realized that there needed to be work on shifting culture in Scarborough, where so many people are pedestrians, cyclists, drivers, and often are all the same people are the same 3 things. When we started connecting with other groups across Scarborough, we changed our name to Toronto East Cyclists. The main reason for that is we recognize that 1/3 of the geographical area of Toronto is Scarborough. And so wanted to sort of let those downtown people know that we're part of Toronto as well. A lot of our work has also been connecting with some of those organizations that work across Toronto. I'm on the Toronto Community Bikeways Coalition. We work with Cycle Toronto. Scarborough Cycles also works out here, Walk Toronto, all those kinds of organizations. Often we're the voice with staff and with those organizations saying you have to recognize it's different in Scarborough, and the way you implement things in Scarborough, the way you have conversations, the cultures are different out here as well. So any kind of work on safe roads has to recognize that this is we're part of Toronto, but we're a different part of Toronto. I'll keep this brief. Really appreciate it, the kinds of things you had in your platform, so you know what I would probably say more about to someone else. So really appreciate that's all in there. But I think one of the key things is just to remind you that our roads here in Scarborough are not working for anyone. Car-on-car collisions, the volume of traffic is rapidly increasing, and it's not just at rush hour, it's all times of day. If you're a pedestrian or a cyclist in Scarborough, you're more likely to be hit than any other part of the city. And if you're hit, you're more likely to be killed. Yes. Having to do with the road design, having to do with the speed, and the volume of traffic. Another piece that we've really worked on is the myth of Scarborough as a car-oriented community. When in fact you look at the statistics, there are more people without driver's licenses in many areas of Scarborough than places like even downtown. So even though the build was originally designed with the idea of these neighborhoods that people would drive in and out of, would probably drive downtown for work, as Scarborough has changed, who lives here is very different. And there are a lot of people who depend on something other than a car. And when they do, they put their lives in danger. Another piece is this really is ground zero for climate change. I see as neighbors move in, they try transit, they really want to try cycling, and they find it scary. They want to be a pedestrian, and I'll talk about some of the reasons why it's doesn't even work to be a pedestrian outside of the safety. And so they're buying cars and adding more cars to roads that already weren't designed for the volume that we have now. I think another thing that's important is to recognize all the issues that are talked about here are connected. So we're seeing development, huge condos, huge numbers of people going in. Scarborough Southwest, where I am, is one of those areas where thousands of people are going in without plans for the infrastructure to support those people going in. So, they've got all kinds of bike parking spaces, but nowhere to bike. Another thing that's happening is a lot of those condos are going in where there was employment. They're going in where there were services like grocery stores. I live right by the Sun Valley grocery store. I used to walk to get my groceries. I can't anymore. I bike. My partner, she drives to get groceries when they would have walked. More cars on our road, making our roads more dangerous. The other thing that we found is that there's a real sense that Scarborough people are all going and working downtown, but that's not the case. We're actually not Scarborough, we're multiple communities, and we work with Rhoda and others, that really we've got local communities and hubs that when we come to traffic design, when we come to road design, all those kinds of things really have to consider that it's almost like we've got multiple cities. We've got 6 cities right here in Scarborough alone. Just to connect that with I think that just the overall is recognizing the difference in the culture here that really need to involve people in Scarborough in the redesign of our roads. We're the folks that use them and recognize this isn't King Street downtown, this is Scarborough, and the way roads are used are different, and the way people interact with their communities is different. City staff has started to get that. So we've seen shifts in that as well, but then you as a councillor that's from a different part, and I again grateful that you're out here to get a sense that really need to engage the people here in the design of the community that they're in. Thank you. Good. I hope we got that short enough.
That's perfect. I know we had to try to put some time limits on it, but there's grace periods too. She's not here yet, but she will be. We'll get her in here to speak too. The next, those are all very good things, right? And I think the message is, get out of your office and come and see the place, like you just said as a counselor, right? You can't just sit there and look at Google and say, that looks like a great place to put a building. See what's going on at 9 o'clock in the morning, at 9 o'clock at night, you'll see what's going on. The demographics change like night and day. So I think that's the key thing. So that's probably one of the biggest messages. And I've done that too at Midland and Eglinton, where they're rerouting the roads. And we had a call and we talked about it, and they were going to get back to us. Nothing happens. You do building permits and stuff. You have the staff. They're in silos. You ask about what's happening with schools. Well, that's another area. Well, bring them to the meeting. So, you know what, and nobody comes back to us. That's the key message going on here. So they gotta come out of their office, get in the bus, a car, I don't know. They'll realize what they have to do, what mode of transportation is there. So we're gonna move over to Larry Watmore from SCRO, since he's at that end of the table.
Okay. Welcome, Councillor Matlow. Thanks for coming out today and learning more about Scarborough and doing it right here, because we're really grateful for you being here. Thank you. I am the president of the Scarborough Community Renewal Organization. We're an all-volunteer advocacy organization focused on Scarborough and on matters that have broad application across Scarborough as a whole. So we strive to bring what we call thoughtful advocacy to Scarborough affairs, and also to address those areas of concern that only public investment can solve. We're also working to change the image of Scarborough, to push back against the unhelpful stereotypes that have applied for far too long, and also to install a sense of community pride among the 650,000 of us that have chosen to call Scarborough home, and you're seeing a microcosm of that Scarborough passion in the room today. So to that end, we also organize and operate the Scarborough Walk of Fame. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Scarborough Walk of Fame in Scarborough Town Center. Our next induction ceremony takes place on April 10th, coming up at Scarborough Town Center. Mayor Chow is bringing greetings for the city, which we're very grateful for. We have so many terrific, accomplished, and famous people in Scarborough or come from Scarborough, and it's great to be able to honor them through the Scarborough Walk of Fame. All these folks have stars on Walk of Fame Court in Scarborough Town Center, so pretty cool. Scarborough is on the cusp of enormous change in the next decade or two, and it's important that we take action now to try and manage this change as elegantly as we can. Condos will be sprouting along our avenues over the next 20 to 30 years, bulldozing pretty much everything in their way. Gentrification is beginning to happen in some pockets of Scarborough, and it's going to spread in the coming years. This is good in some ways, as gentrification brings wealth and prosperity, but it comes at a cost. It's making Toronto's most affordable neighborhoods more expensive. And it's not just a residential issue. We're starting to lose the affordable commercial rents in our employment areas and in our unloved but vibrant strip malls. Even though they don't look vibrant, but they are. And we're losing them in many, quite often to condos as well. And that's pushing out many small businesses and the important entry-level jobs that they provide, especially for our aspiring newcomers, and we have many, many of them in Scarborough, as you know. These businesses bring economic and cultural vibrancy to Scarborough, and we're afraid of losing that. So through this gentrification, we get more wealth and prosperity, but it comes with social and economic dislocation, which is unsettling to see. We talked about this with city planning staff during the recent official plan review as part of the Community Leaders Circle. And we discussed the current planning preferences for what they like to call 15-minute neighborhoods, which I sense is implementable downtown. But it feels to me like we're going in the opposite direction in Scarborough, which is not good. Condos will help with housing pressures, but at the expense of services and amenities that create complete communities. And that includes jobs, which will be hard to create if our employment areas are at risk of dying death by 1,000 cuts, one rezoning application at a time. So we're trying to push back against this, and I know council is too, to a point. But we need to push back against this to ensure that Scarborough can offer jobs and neighborhood amenities to the people we have here now, in addition to the surge in population that we know is coming. And if we are losing jobs in particular because of conversion to housing, we're solving one problem by creating another. Toronto is expected to absorb 700,000 more residents over the next 30 years, which will require 450,000 more jobs. And those figures come from the province and were given to city planning to work with. Council is all in on the housing issue, which is commendable. We'd like to see the same level of commitment on the jobs issue and on the need to protect neighborhood amenities as this evolution happens. We have food deserts now in southwest Scarborough, and we fear there's going to be more to come as gentrification continues. And of course, there's public transit. We've heard a lot about this today. I'll pile on. If Toronto's going to grow by 700,000 residents over the next 30 years, realistically, at least 150,000 of them are going to come to Scarborough. How are we going to get around? We're not building any more roads. The only solution is a massive investment in higher order public transit to address this, which is starting to happen, finally, which is nice to see. We're all very much looking forward to the completion of the Scarborough subway extension, which is scheduled for 2030, but there's much more to be done. We're grateful for Council's $1.2 billion commitment to the extension of the Eglinton East LRT from Kennedy Station to U of T Scarborough and Malvern, which is great. And SCRO is now putting pressure on the province and the federal government for each of them to match the funding commitment that you folks have already made, because they need to step up too. And we're also encouraging the province to move forward with the work that's starting to happen on the Shepherd Avenue transit extension, which is also important, because we need to get moving on all these initiatives now, knowing how long it takes to plan, design, and construct projects of this scale. Otherwise, 2053 is going to be here before we know it. Toronto's 25% bigger in population than we are now, and there's going to be gridlock everywhere. We really, really need to avoid that happening. One more thing. Scarborough was developed as a bedroom community back in the day. I was part of that. Thankfully, we're more than that now. And we're striving to find a path forward so that as Scarborough evolves and turns into Scarborough 2.0, if you will, that it doesn't turn into a bedroom community once again, where we have wall-to-wall condos for people to live, but there's nowhere for them to work, there's nowhere for them to play, and there's nowhere for them to shop. And that would be receding back to the kind of sterile environment that, for many people argue, characterized Scarborough in its early days, where you lived here but you didn't do anything else here. And we've really, really worked hard, I think, over the past 20 to 30 years to create economic and cultural vibrancy in Scarborough. Maybe not, it doesn't look like quite downtown yet, but in our own way. And we don't want to lose that through what both housing at the expense of everything else and through gentrification. And we know this is not easy, if it were to be done by now. And it sometimes feels like a zero-sum game. You address a housing problem, but then our residents have to travel further to work or shop, be it to Markham or Vaughan or Oshawa. We should be able to do better. So we're looking to start a conversation on this with you and other members of council, and provide direction to staff so that we can support each other in a way that allows us to arrive at a high finesse evolution for Scarborough as this evolution happens over the next 20 to 30 years, and we end up at that time with a Scarborough 2.0 that we're proud of and that we don't have regrets because we missed opportunities. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, thanks, Larry. Shawn Allen from Scarborough Business isn't here, that I can see. So he won't be able to speak on his behalf. I think the summary is here with so far what we're just discussing. So We need jobs in Scarborough, we need businesses in Scarborough, we need investment in Scarborough. And right now, it's kind of like, there's a wall there called the Don Valley sort of thing, roughly, and who comes over, there'll be a toll gate or something. We don't want that, we want integration, and diversity, of course. So he can write a letter to me and share it with you later. Okay, but appreciate it. Next on the list is Scarborough Health Network, and we have Kevin speaking today.
Hello. Hi, so I work at Scarborough Health Network. I'm a mental health crisis worker. I've been asked to speak a little bit about mental health and homelessness. I don't have a lot of statistics for you, but I am going to tell you a little bit about my job and some of the things that I've experienced in regards to mental health and homelessness, and some broader stuff about mental health as well that I hope you find helpful. So we all know about the funding. Scarborough has 25% of the population and 1% of the funding. So that's a problem, obviously. We talked a bit about mental health and addictions and the shelter crisis, and Rhoda talked about the hotels. So my job is mental health crisis. I work mostly at Birchmount, sometimes at General. And there's two aspects of the program. One is we see people in the emergency who come in, psychosis, substance use issues, suicidality, violent aggressive behavior. So we do that, we assess them, decide whether they need to be admitted or not, and we also operate a 24-hour mental health crisis line and provide support to people who've been discharged. We offer some short-term CBT and DBT-oriented counseling. I'm also a psychotherapist, so if anybody wants to talk to me about that, I'm happy to do that afterwards. Different concerns, as I mentioned, suicidality, psychosis. Many of them are brought in by police, and it's our job to make decisions as to who needs to be admitted and who doesn't, and who would best be served by going home, sometimes with follow-up. Sometimes with psychiatric follow-up, and sometimes just to carry on with things. And of course, in regards to suicidality, we have to assess whether somebody is a threat to themselves. Usually we look at how to make those decisions, access to a means and a plan to actually harm yourself. And if you remember your Shakespeare, to be or not to be, and the biblical book of Job, it's fairly common, to think about that sometimes when things are really bad for you. And I would say that when we do speak to people about suicide, it's imperative as soon as possible to try and give them a sense of hope and say, this is something that's worth living for. And also substance use, we see people who have substance use concerns, and oftentimes we have to wait until they sober up before we accurately assess them and make decisions about admission or discharge. Not everybody we see who exhibits violent or aggressive behavior is psychotic. Now, if they're psychotic, of course, they're really not in control of their behavior. It's really not their fault. So sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, and it's sometimes difficult to determine, right? So we have to try and do those, some difficult decisions that we have to make. If somebody is aggressive, of course we have to restrain them to keep people in the ED safe, in addition to staff and the patients themselves. And we do that physically or chemically, which is difficult. In terms of coercive treatment, that means treating somebody against their will. People have varying views on that. My opinion is that it's absolutely necessary sometimes. And of course, when we have to admit people, it's almost always done against their will. And so think about what that would be like for you if you had to be confined to a hospital bed, your charter rights taken away. It's a pretty difficult thing. I really like this job because the way I see it is, it gives me an opportunity to help someone when they're most in need. I've worked in mental health and in GTA for almost my whole 20-year career. In terms of aggressive behavior, the statistic that you should know is that 4% of people who have a mental health issue will act in an aggressive way, and 4% of people in the rest of society will act in an aggressive way. So in terms of stigma, a person with a mental health issue is no more likely to act in a violent way than anybody else in the rest of society. In fact, a person with a mental health issue is more likely to be a victim of a violent event rather than a perpetrator of one. I will say that Clara Hughes' Spell Let's Talk campaign has been fantastic. Over the last 12 years, the number of people who feel comfortable talking about a mental health concern has doubled from 42% to 84%. So getting to the homelessness issue, when somebody comes in, if they are homeless, they have nowhere to go, and they need to be discharged, usually we have to try and find them a shelter bed, and there are challenges there. I've had experiences where you call central intake, or you assist someone calling central intake, and there's no bed, and they say, call back in 2 hours. On one occasion, I had to discharge somebody, and we helped them call central intake. They were told they go to a location in Scarborough where they could wait for 2 hours. This is like 8 o'clock at night, and then 2 hours after that, then they can't stay overnight, and they have to go somewhere else. And that's a problem, because there's no guarantee they could end up on the street, right? Patient I saw just last week was homeless, stabbed his wrist, not in a suicide attempt, but because he was frustrated with being homeless. He came in, he said, nothing changes in my life. I didn't have any suicidal ideation, there was no history of mental health issues, so we discharged him. Called, no bed. Called back in 2 hours. Called again, no bed. My shift was over, I passed it over to my colleague, and I followed up with him the next day, and I found out that he was able to stay in the waiting area overnight, but they couldn't find him a bed, right? And when I told him that he had to leave the room because we needed for another patient, he was really angry, really upset, which is understandable, right? So he had to wait in the waiting room all night anyway, and still didn't find a bed, but anyway. We receive calls on the crisis line. Sometimes hotel staff call us and say, what do we do with this patient or this client? And we try to give some advice. Sometimes if someone's been aggressive at a shelter, they come to us, they're discharged, the shelter says, we don't want that person back, which is also a problem. Sometimes people don't want to go to a shelter because they're scared of falling into a substance use issue or a bad lifestyle, which is understandable. We see new Canadians sometimes who are in temporary housing. My colleague told me about a situation where she got a call from someone, a woman whose husband had passed away, living in her store, and then became homeless. Again, the 2-hour thing, they call for a bed, there's no bed. And I would say over the course of the last 2 years since I've been in this job, things are getting worse, not better. Sometimes we have to put someone in a taxi, sit them down to Peter Street, where there still is no guarantee of getting a bed. So obviously this is a broader societal problem, and I see this in my job at the hospital there, when I see people in need. Sometimes people don't have a mental health issue, but they say, I want to be admitted because I have nowhere else to go, right? We call that secondary gain. And that's also a problem because hospitals are not places for people to go who are homeless. And so when we discharge someone, I'm sure you can understand, like any reasonable human being would not want to discharge someone like that. So that's a problem, but we have to do that. There's a lot of research about something called social determinants of health. You may have heard about that stuff. Well-documented research, things that actually affect people's mental and physical health problems, including, and I'll list them, income and social status, employment and working conditions, education and literacy, childhood experiences, physical environments, social supports and coping skills, healthy behaviors, access to health services, biology and genetic endowment, gender, culture, and race and racism. And so, to truly address mental health and other physical health problems, you have to consider those. There's a psychologist named Abraham Maslow, perhaps you've heard of him. He talked about it, it's called a hierarchy of needs, right? So at the bottom are, physiological needs like housing, food, stuff like that, and you move up, physiological, safety and security, love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization. So in order to move up, you have to address the bottom first, right? So that's our job to some extent, and this is a problem in Scarborough. We have to address these physiological basic needs first. And Gandhi said, the measure of a society is how well it takes care of its most disenfranchised members. So I'm sure you have different opinions on that. So that's pretty much our job. I do have to just say one thing. I know this is a bit off topic. It'll just take me a minute. I think I'd be doing myself a disservice if I didn't mention it. I'm Jewish, and within the last 2 weeks, outside synagogues, I was bullied, intimidated, and almost physically attacked 3 times outside 2 separate synagogues holding peaceful events. And that shouldn't be happening in our city, in our country, and it's a problem. And the Jewish people in this city are under attack. Just quickly, the dialogue right now should be about what happened on October 7th, the ensuing war to eliminate Hamas, to accomplish that with minimal casualties as possible. And once that occurs, let's sit down and talk peace. So just an invitation, obviously, with regards to what I said about mental health and what I said about the situation in Israel. If anyone wants to have a calm, rational discussion with me, with mutual respect about what's happening in Israel, the war, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, I'm fairly knowledgeable about it, and I'm happy to do that with you, especially if you're willing to consider the deeper truth about what's happening.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Appreciate that. And a lot happening in Scarborough on the other side of it. We thought that would be interesting from Scarborough Health perspective. And the world has got lots to deal with. We have one more on the list. It's development. And we have Marina and Peter who are going to speak about it in tandem.
Thank you, Ron and Son, and Councillor Matlow for letting us speak today. Peter and I are both directors of the Cliffcrest Scarborough Village Southwest Residents Association. And we're gonna talk about development challenges. I'm gonna do something a little different. I'm gonna do a little narrative and take you through a tour of our neighborhoods. And then Peter's gonna speak to that. So today I'm gonna take my friend Lynn grocery shopping, and I'd like to take you along for the ride also. The closest grocery store is 2 kilometers away. Lynn is 80, and a walk would be too much for her. Lynn likes to bike ride, but it's icy outside and the snow has not melted, so not a good idea today. 3 short bus rides would get us to the store, but it's not efficient and very time consuming. So it looks like we're gonna have to drive. On the way, I drop off my husband at the GO station. The parking lot is full. Good thing I'm dropping him off, or he would have nowhere to park. As I drive past a new build on the street, I recall a weekend call from an upset neighbor where 5 large, mature trees were cut down without permits. With no enforcement on weekends, all we could do was place a call to 311 and lodge a complaint with Urban Forestry. Many letters raising concerns for our trees were never responded to and ignored. This home went to the COA and variances were approved for this monster build. I remember when engaging with local residents to prepare for the COA hearing, explaining to them that we're not allowed to question at the COA why 3 kitchens and 10 bathrooms are needed for the build. You may be interested to know that stats reflect that only 2% of applications that go to the COA in our catchment are refused, and this is not including homes that fall within the small residential builds. As we sit waiting at the red light to turn, I look over at the white and blue sign posted on the side of the road. Any guesses what that's for?
Posting. Development posting.
The sign shows outdated information, but I'm very familiar with the details. More than 100 residents attended a community consultation for this application. Many follow-ups and concerns raised with city teams were never responded to. And despite the fact that the applicant submitted studies that city staff were not satisfied with, the application was deemed complete and the applicant was able to appeal at the OLT. The RA engaged legal counsel and a professional planner to ensure that we had a seat at the negotiation table for this part of the process. For the most part, we found ourselves in the dark. The city, as led by their legal team, chose to work with the developer without once engaging with the RA. This is just one blue and white sign and one experience. These signs are all over the city, and from speaking with other RAs, they too echo the same concerns. Community consultations are more like presentations, and reports and studies appear to be a checkbox. The car behind me honks to let me know the light has turned green, so I continue my drive. We pass the Dorset Park Hub trail. There were 2 separate significant landslides that occurred recently just east of the trail. I remember I need to send another follow-up email to the city. Since 2022, the RA has been asking for studies that report on cumulative impact for development. For example, there are 3 immediate proposals within a block of each other with 2-story deep parking lots running parallel to the bluffs. Data reveals a potential population increase of 2,500 residents from just these 3 developments. None of the avenue segment studies look at the picture of all 3 proposals collectively. What will the impact be to infrastructure, traffic and safety, schools, healthcare, environment, and our spectacular bluffs? I turned the corner and passed a condo that was completed 3 years ago. Lynn points to all the retail spaces that are sitting empty. I noticed a parking enforcement officer is giving out a ticket at a car that is parked illegally on the road. And looking down the street, I see the overflow parking from condo residents along the street. I complain out loud to Lynn, well, if they did have stores, I don't know where I would park. The elimination of minimum parking for new developments needs to be reviewed. We need better transit. There should be parking if we can't have the transit. Nobody wants to park illegally. They do it because they have no other choice. Traffic is backed up here. The city is again doing some infrastructure work. As I come down the road towards the grocery store, my car hits a big pothole, and Lynn comments, "In the 40 years that I have lived in this neighborhood, I don't recall the roads being in this much disrepair. What is happening to our city?" I noticed Tony walking his dog and pull over to say hello. He tells me he has made another call with regards to the build next door to his home. Review of the Toronto Building Permit Status page for this site reveals many failed inspections in addition to many calls by residents for safety violations over the last 3 years. I say I remember the house was a rooming house for 2 years, occupied anywhere from between 2 and 15 renters with multiple cars on the driveway. Calls were made to 311, MLS, and the fire department for investigation at least once a week for the entire 2 years to enact enforcement for potential bylaw violations with no real consequence. Lynn comments, "Wow, that's 5 years you've been dealing with that bill, Tony? Well, I'm concerned for the homeowners that will buy these homes," and we all agree. Tony points to 8 other homes recently purchased by developers just on his street alone, and explains that there is a group of investors, architects, and builders who've amassed an overwhelming inventory of homes in our local neighborhoods. One of them recently was in the news for having his building license revoked. Lynn asks, will they become rooming houses also? I share that they will either sit empty or become a pop-up rooming house. These homes will never get registered or brought to compliance. They are a temporary step in their very organized process as developers wait for permits to be issued. These homes are easy to identify, unkept lawns, overflowing cars, and not enough garbage bins. I tell Lynn that the home next to me is a rooming house. I often walk around picking up garbage that has blown over from the house next door. I've spoken to tenants before and told them they should speak to their landlord for more garbage bins. 2 is not enough for 10 people. They ask me, "Please don't say anything. We don't want to be evicted." That sounds like a real problem, says Lynn, and I agree, but it's going to get worse. I go on to explain that despite many RA and resident letters raising concerns for multi-tenant housing, it will be permitted in Scarborough as of March 31st. Toronto has not received enabling legislation from the province to allow inspection, and without a tested framework for multi-tenant housing that has proper controls and remedies in place, these significant and abrupt policy changes have the potential for unforeseen and unintended impacts on residents and the entire neighborhoods. The RA participated in all of the EHON initiative consultations. Again, these are presentations and check marks in the process. We have yet to see what the challenges and impacts of approved multiplexes and garden suites will be, as well as the not approved major street initiative. It is frightening to consider that the future of our neighborhoods, knowing rooming houses want to be expanded, and that the city continues to approve more condos and push the EHON initiatives without evaluating impact. Furthermore, these builds will not deliver the much needed affordable housing we need in our city. While I help Lynn unload her shopping from my car, I will let Peter speak now with regards to some of the concerns we saw during our drive.
What a way.
Thank you, Marina. I know anyone here from Scarborough who lives in Scarborough will both relate and remember what you said. Councillor, thank you for coming up. I appreciate that. And thank you also to Ron and Son for organizing it today. I'm going to speak on housing and on a few housing-related initiatives by the city, but I'm going to be mindful of time as I'm just going to get in and get out quickly. Multiplexes and rooming houses, which Marina was just talking about, should only be allowed when either the owner, beneficial or otherwise, or their licensed property management is available with a 24-hour contact information. It should not be up to us or the neighbors to monitor property standards. Additionally, rooming houses should not be legalized until the city seeks and receives permission or a way to compel the unlicensed homes to become licensed, because currently you cannot get into the unlicensed homes. So if I'm an investor and I own an unlicensed home, you can't come in unless I allow you. If I'm licensed, you have a right to. It doesn't pass the sniff test. Currently, the city has an official plan that deals with arterial roads, that in order to, well, the apartment zones are there in order to supply the missing middle that planners are fond of saying we need. We need to keep building the missing middle. Arterial road development on roads like Kingston Road, in our opinion, should be capped at 9 stories, or better yet, capped at the 1-to-1 ratio of building height to street width that I believe still exists in the OP for apartment zones. That way you do get the missing middle. Additionally, environmental discrimination needs to stop. And what do I mean by environmental discrimination? I'm talking about the NIAs, the neighborhood improvement areas. It'd be interesting if a city decided to do a study to see if the non-neighborhood improvement areas are losing their green space to the same degree that we in the neighborhood improvement areas, like Scarborough Village, seem to be losing ours. Any takers that can speak for that particular project? While we're at it, the 3-to-1 ratio for tree replacement has to be substantially increased. I believe the study showed that for each tree you take down, you probably need to plant 50, not this token amount of 3. Now, again, being mindful of time, I'm going to get on to housing. Housing is a complex issue. We do not pretend to have all the answers. Not sure anyone does, and if anyone said they did, not sure I trust them. However, if I can leave you with anything today, it would be 4 simple words: land, labor, capital, and materials. These 4 simple words, in conjunction with political will, are the 4 fundamental components in the development of any type of housing. The cost of capital, particularly the return required by private equity, is the reason why you see numerous, way past the approval stage, shovel-ready projects in Scarborough that have not yet broken ground. Perhaps treating housing, particularly rental housing, as both a commodity and as someone's home is attempting to serve 2 masters with 2 completely different sets of priorities. Now, I'm not suggesting that there isn't room for for-profit housing. It's just that it does not appear to be working for the provision of truly affordable housing for middle and lower income families, and it definitely doesn't work for providing supportive housing for complex needs and or our unhoused populations. So what if in some instances we seriously consider ways to reduce the cost of possibly 1 or more of land, labor, capital, and materials? By instead of selling municipal land, you lease it. Municipally owned land that is leased, at least it has the potential to decrease the land component cost of housing if it's done correctly. But it also allows future generations the flexibility to chart their own course, because their needs may be so different in ways we haven't even thought of. But once you sell the land, you've lost it forever. I applaud and understand equity and non-equity co-ops, an idea from a generation or 2 ago that I remember, appears to be gaining traction. I am also aware of a couple of organizations that have ownership models that, through the medium of cooperative financing, result in a deeded home, in other words, condos. Now, the devil's always in the details, and I'm not here to shill for those groups. However, simplistically, as I understand it, because I understand everything simplistically, I understand what they're trying to do is like creating a bank of mom and dad for those people who don't have a bank of mom and dad. So if this is achievable, it's possible. It's possible that it deserves to be scrutinized as well as considered. as I understand what they're attempting to do, and if somebody knows this better, please speak to me later, but they're requiring, they're taking a good chunk of the required down payment and they are deferring it. They are deferring it until the owner sells or rents their premises out. Again, any plan that has this potential is worth looking at. One more idea, and we've talked about this before, Josh. Given the current requirements of private equity, and their returns are required to go up, and I understand that, there's nothing wrong with what they're doing, but they're not perfect for what we need here in Scarborough. Maybe it's time to relook at the idea of tax-free municipal bonds. We have to consider specifically those earmarked for various projects. I mean, they can be as esoteric as we'd like them. Yes, you need provincial and federal approvals. However, these could be specific to end users or simply to those looking for personal investments as an alternative to GICs. Why that? If I can think of that, I'm not sure why the brighter minds in the province, the federal government, and the city haven't already thought of that. I know there was a study done 30 years ago, and I looked at the rationale as to why they turned it down. I couldn't see it.
I moved the motion on the very subject. I agree.
Now, the point being is they could be, well, actually, mindful of the time. My last point is simply, city-owned land should never be sold until their highest and best use has been determined. Specifically, the density that's allowed. Because, and all the approvals in place. And the reason I'm saying that is I was at a meeting a number of years ago, pre-COVID, where Bill Toronto, the precursor of Thankyou, said that's what they wanted to do. But I believe what might be happening is it gets sold, gets redeveloped, and the taxpayers, us, get the benefit of its, not the enhanced value of the post-zoning, but the zoning that it was sold under. And I think that really isn't helpful. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate you coming out here, and take care.
Wow. We're really on time, actually ahead of time, but that's good. That's good. I appreciate everyone speaking, and I think at this point, we can have an opportunity for questions from the floor.
Can I make some comments?
Oh, you can, yeah.
Before we.
Just tell me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I obviously I will truncate my remarks because I get to a TED Talk on a number of the subjects here. Excuse me, but first of all, I want to thank you all for very thoughtful, very in-depth learning opportunities for me and I think for all of us. And what we and you are doing today is what every community should do. Coming together, sharing, learning from each other, focusing on problems, but more importantly, trying to find solutions. And you know, when you bring up a lot of the social challenges we have in our communities, it's happening in Scarborough. It's certainly happening elsewhere in the city and throughout North America and really around the world today. And since the pandemic, we've seen it more and more. You know, the hidden challenges we had. You know, people who were in the ravines are now in the parks, and in the colder months, they're in the subway and on the buses, and we need to face this challenge. I agree completely. You know, when I worked with the two local councillors on the Delta Amendment Council.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And you know, I believe the city has a responsibility, and certainly in an emergency response, the city used hotels as shelters during the pandemic. But moving forward, I don't believe that these sort of massive facilities are the best way to go. We need smaller buildings where it can be supported by the social services to support those clients who need that help, along with ensuring that rather than simply leasing these buildings and paying an exorbitant amount of money, that we should actually own buildings where we support those individuals, we make sure that they have the supportive services that they need. For some individuals, that means mental health, addiction support, and otherwise. And then hopefully use those buildings to support supportive housing transition towards permanent housing arrangements, so that people not only they have the assistance that they need to get onto their feet, but then to continue walking forward. That is the path that we need to be taking rather than reacting. We need an actual path forward for these individuals and therefore our communities. And when we do support those individuals, we need to make sure that communities have the supports that they need, the local shops have the supports that they need, that there's supports for the local schools, etc., as we did in Midtown Toronto when we went through a very similar experience. I know that sometimes these debates become these, I think, very unfairly binary debates between, do you care about homeless people or are you a monster and you don't care about them at all? The reality is, I think most people absolutely care about supporting each other. They just want to make sure that it's done well and done responsibly, so that we mitigate any adverse impacts and that we're prepared for success for everyone involved. And I think that's the more caring and thoughtful approach that we all need to take. With respect to, and I really respect and appreciate the hard work that you and your colleagues do to support people in Scarborough who need it. When it comes to transit and active transportation, listen, the reason that I advocated for years, and I know this was controversial at the time, but the reason that I advocated for the LRT plan rather than the subway plan was simple. There was a fully funded transit plan that the province actually supported to move forward with 7 stops rather than 1 stop or 3 stop. And if you do the math, that's better. That serves more communities. It serves more, supported more places of higher education such as Centennial. It would have connected over to U of T Scarborough. It was a better plan to begin with. That all being said, the reality is the subway was approved and now we need to support it. We want to get it done. I hope that it's done at least by 2030 and that doesn't see the same path as the crosstown has taken. But that's why it's so important that as the years go by in between, that yet another generation isn't caught in the middle of traffic on a bus, and we need that busway built and we need it done as quickly as possible. And that's why I've been advocating for it for years. And I'm happy to have been working with my colleague Jamal Myers on that at the TTC. I completely agree that it needs to be excuse me, a contiguous transportation network, including getting the Shepherd extension done now, get the province actually moving forward with what they committed to, with actual money, which is always the hardest part, and then connecting to Malvern and then connecting the whole LRT, the Eglinton East LRT to connect a great wide network for this massive part of our city. When they said, oh, well, we're building the Scarborough subway, you know, Scarborough's much bigger than Scarborough Town Centre. So we really do need a network connecting this entire region of our city. That goes with getting the West Scarborough rail path done and other paths to connect bikeways and to connect walking trails and making sure that people have safe ways to get around this part of the city as well. And I appreciate what you said, that yes, there is a different culture and there's a different narrative and there's a different context. And I do get that when people feel like something's being shoved down their throat, there's often a habit of kind of pushing back. And I think that if we do it thoughtfully and do it in the right places, that people can accept it more and work with it. But it has to be done with people rather than at people. And I think that's typically the best approach when you're working on public policy in general. But I really appreciate the advocacy that all of you are doing with respect to active transportation and mass transportation, because that's how we're not going to force people out of their cars. And frankly, cars aren't going anywhere. They may not be reliant on gas in the future, but they're going to be electric. But people can make better choices if they have those options, and we need to create those options for them. That will decrease traffic, decrease congestion, and hopefully contribute to safer streets. You're right, the majority of fatalities and are happening in Scarborough, and the preponderance of those are seniors. And we need to do everything we can to prevent that. When it comes to it, I'm sort of going to merge the whole issue around development and planning. I hope you saw this in my platform. Every part of our city, I believe, shouldn't just have either a secondary plan, no plan at all, or a reaction to development. we need to be looking at housing in concert with hard infrastructure, social services, and park space. The quality of life needs to keep up with the pace of growth. That those who live here today and those who will move here in the future will want a school for their kids to go to, will want affordable childcare nearby, will want a park nearby, will want a transit stop nearby, social service, they want the pipes and the wires to be able to deliver to their homes. And if you don't do that together, that's bad planning. If you don't do that in a SimCity game, you will fail, you will lose that game. And cities should be no different. So what I've been proposing is that we should be looking at areas of our city, and rather than pretend that a one size fits all everywhere, to look at regions of our city, neighborhoods in our city, and holistically plan for housing, infrastructure, social services, and park space together. And if you do that well, then you're not simply reacting to every ad hoc development that doesn't always consider the impact of the next development and then the next development. If you do it together, you can honestly address the housing crisis along with everything you need to support everyone who lives there. That is better planning. That's something that I'm advocating very forcefully for. And you know, I really appreciate the work that that you and all of your healthcare professionals do in Scarborough. I'm aware of the amount of people and the very low ratio of money that you still receive, even though the province has committed that they would provide more funding to local hospitals like General. And I really appreciate the advocacy that you provide. And you know, the last thing you said, I you know, it's always dangerous to go into these matters these days because they're so controversial. But I think it's fair to say that if all of us can agree, that what happened on October 7th was a horrible massacre that should be denounced and condemned, and that none of us want to see tens of thousands of Palestinians killed, and that all of us, no matter who we are, no matter our religion or identity, should never be subject to violence, to hatred, to discrimination, and that when that happens, all of us need to circle around each other and protect each other and support each other and love each other. That's the Toronto that I want. That's the Toronto that all of us want. And I hope that we can see that commonality far more than the polarizing divisions that some would like to provoke. And I'll stop there, but that took a lot of courage to say what you said, and I respect you for it.
Thank you.
I will conclude by saying, you know, you mentioned earlier about the reputation of Scarborough. I don't know if you recall me mentioning this at the Scarborough debate, but, and I'm not running for mayor right now, so I mean it. I really have fallen in love with Scarborough. You know, over the years, so my wife's Melissa, I've got an 11-year-old daughter named Molly, and for many, many years, including my own childhood, you know, we've been coming to, whether it be hiking at the bluffs, going to the Rouge to see the fireflies. It's a magical, green part of our city. And I don't think most Torontonians understand how this is a part of our city where you can see everything from the most beautiful green ecosystems to farms. Like, nobody knows that in this city, and we need to boast about it more. And this is, you know, this is the land of Mike Myers and Lily Singh and so many great celebrities that have stars at the Scarborough Town Centre. This is a remarkable place. And yes, it has its challenges. Other parts of our city does too. We need to learn from great examples like in Regent Park and other parts where we can. But I will continue trumpeting how much I love this part of our city. And I look forward to many more opportunities to come and visit you again. Thank you.
Great. So, yeah, thanks very much. We'll have some time.
Yeah.
And I think the key thing is if there's someone who has a question or a comment, that's fine.
Yeah.
With respect, of course. It's been a great meeting for him. It's a lunch and learn without the lunch. We're not for profit.
We can't afford
Truly
that.
not for profit. So, is there anyone who has any comments or questions they want to ask? Josh? Okay.
Listen, so I guess after the Scarborough subway gets built, there's always conversations about what are we going to do with the busway. I know there's talks about turning it into maybe like a part, like I think they have in Brooklyn.
Yeah, the High Line.
The High Line, yeah. So like, what kind of conversations have been happening on the TTC level around that?
Yeah, very active conversations. What we would like to see is the busway to remain, along with a green space like the High Line, for walking, biking, taking, having a little peace in the middle of a big city. But the busway infrastructure could remain as another component of the transportation network. You will see even on this council agenda, two separate motions from different councillors. I think everybody wants it in their newsletter, to speak candid, to advocate for whatever we call whatever we end up calling the Scarborough,
Scarborough Skyway.
Scarborough Skyway. That's right. But I think it's a wonderful idea. But like all these wonderful ideas, we need to actually fund it and make it happen. I think our first priority before we even go there is to just get this busway. Like just from a functional utilitarian purpose, we need to move people around over the next 10 years. Please let it just be. But certainly that's something that both Chair Myers and I support.
I just go on record. SWRA also supports it.
Good.
And we're submitting a letter as well to the council, so we're 120% behind this.
And any of you who've been to the Manhattan High Line, it is an oasis. It is so incredible.
We see that as being the template.
That's right.
What we would strive to do here.
And it was community that made that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to realize too, at Scarborough Town Center, that is going to be a multitude of high-rise, and they have a dog park and a small forest. That's all they'll have for green space. So it adds to that. We already have the structure, let's use it.
Absolutely.
Let's use it.
It's interesting too, in that I was on calls back in 2020 with our councillors, Scarborough Center, about that whole thing, and TTC and Metrolinx was involved in all that, with the stuff going on. And we had discussed it, and then said, yeah, okay, that's the way to get when it's gonna go down, take the rails off and put buses on. Nothing happened since 2020 until it broke.
Yeah.
And now I go, oh my God, what are we gonna do? This is the constant stuff that we're hearing about, whether it's in development or anything with the city. And this is what we look to as taxpayers, to our councillors at the first level, front line, is to represent us. And from a S.U.N perspective, we started this up as a very, very small group, but the point is that we need to get the voices connected, and we don't agree on everything, but we have to get our voices up to our councillors and to the MPPs now, and to the MPs.
Yeah.
It's gotten a lot bigger than we thought it was gonna be, but it's very important, and I think that's the key thing, is that stuff's sitting there, and our city staff are doing the status quo kind of thing. It's like, we don't hear what's going on. Are you hearing us? We can be on these consultations again, but then are they really, they're just going, check that box, let's go to the next thing, and it's going through. Those are the kinds of things that we really need to keep going, and I think we can grow ours throughout our councillors and our wards, but we need you, hopefully, from taking back on this, is with your councillors that you have your network with, to make it even stronger too. And I encourage them to have a forum like this too.
I appreciate that.
And tell them that, and you come with them or not. It doesn't
And
matter.
there are some like Scarborough councillors like Jamal Myers. You've got a wonderful new councillor in Scarborough Southwest. Like there's some really strong voices for Scarborough here. That being said, though, for years there was always this narrative here at City Hall where Scarborough would say, we're forgotten about, or we've been neglected. And there often is that that kind of suburb versus downtown dynamic. And sometimes it comes across to some years downtown as hyperbole. But if you come out here and you actually experience, whether it be healthcare funding, arts funding, the state of the roads and services as you were describing, to the fact that even the SRT was left with such neglect that it could have been even more of a tragedy if circumstances were different. So I think there actually is truth to that, to some of what was said. And you will continue to hear me, as I do at every TTC meeting, bringing up the word Scarborough every single time. Because I think more of us need to acknowledge that we're all gonna benefit if Scarborough can actually feel, not just feel, but be included in the resources and the supports and the infrastructure and the transit network that much of the rest of the city enjoys today.
Ash, I think, has.
Ash? Ash
yeah,
is
hi.
from Pleasant View.
From Pleasant View, so we're just on the west side of Victoria Park, and for all I know, with the redistribution of ridings, we may
You're
become
part of us.
part of Scarborough.
Welcome.
So a lot of what I've heard today, actually, we're experiencing, at least I can say, from Victoria Park over to the DVP, over to Don Mills. As Rhoda mentioned, we've got the Consumers Next Business Park, which has kind of been neglected and poses such a great opportunity for employment growth, jobs, and tax revenue to the city. Money, you know, you gotta spend money to make money. I'm an accountant by training, but anyway. And then a lot of what I heard from Marina, is it, and Larry, about the process, the ticking boxes, boy, do we feel that. You know, yeah, we're having consultation, tick, okay, done. You know, so a lot of what I'm hearing, we're experiencing in that side, and we're getting a whole slew of condo. Pleasant View from 2016 census was about 16,000 people. With the proposed growth of all the condos between Victoria Park to DVP or to Don Mills, you're gonna add potentially another 16,000.
I should, just in case not all of you are aware of some of the changes that have happened, that, you know, while I'm hearing grievances about the planning division and the feeling of like ticking off the boxes, there are added pressures on them since the Ford government passed Bill 109 and other legislation that has made the process absurd, like to a level where the timelines are so restrictive and so arbitrary, typically 90 days, that city staff either have to kind of rush through to get a final report done, or it goes to the tribunal, which often rubber stamps. And then there's very little to no meaningful consultation on the ground. Or the city staff will acknowledge that they can't get the report done within that arbitrary time frame that the province prescribed, and then it goes to the tribunal. Either way, it goes to the tribunal. So we have lost the ability to make, I think, far more thoughtful, iterative processes on the ground where you engage the developer, you engage the community, and you work through a process that actually builds a better project. I'll give you an example of, if I may, just very quickly, and it's stalled right now because the developer has walked away. But where we have city land at Yonge and Eglinton in the area that I live, at Canada Square, you know where the old, so because that is city property, even though Oxford has the rights to it, they came forward, they did this wonderful consultation process, they talked about farmers markets and all these wonderful things. Then they came forward with a really crappy proposal. And it just didn't, it was a bunch of big buildings, none of them actually interacted with the public space. The public space was underwhelming, there was very little room for social services, schools, anything that we needed in a growing community in Midtown. So the community and I, all the different RAs and other groups got together and we pushed back. And we actually moved a motion that created a different process where we actually got a consultant and we created a vision for our community that then the developer had to react to, rather than us reacting to them. And it worked out to a point where they've gone back to the drawing board. So that can't always work as well on private property, but I believe that's a model for how things should be done, where yes, we need housing, yes, we need services, yes, we need infrastructure, yes, we need public space. And as I said earlier, the best way to have a successful project is doing that all together. And that's what I'd like to see for your communities.
Yeah, part of the challenge though, sometimes the funding that some of these associations have to, you know, kind of come back at developers, whatever, it just is, some of us are grassroots.
And one of the first things that Doug Ford did when he was elected is that he even removed, do you remember when Kathleen Wynne, right at the end of her premiership, created this, I forget what it's called, like an office that helped communities with like, you know, ad hoc legal advice and planning advice and stuff. He removed that. Yet the average developer obviously is far more resourced and have lawyers on retainer.
Josh, if I may, first of all, I'd like to actually thank you for your personal integrity in standing up with some backbone at times, against the Eau Courant flow at council and other places, because believe you me, I've written to you before. It's most appreciated, and you demonstrate a little bit of that just here and now. But vis-a-vis your comment about your powers being removed at council.
Yeah.
I would suggest to you that, first of all, the city is virtually bankrupt financially, perhaps morally as well. Everyone here talked about huge deficits in their services, whether it be roads, transit, housing, health. We don't have the money.
Yeah.
The challenge I'd like for you to consider is, it may be time for the city to just say no. And you have a lot more power than you choose to exercise. At Land Tribunal, the number of hearings that the city fights, virtually none. You can go to judicial review, you can go beyond the Land Tribunal. You can go to the Court of Appeal. I've had these long conversations with senior solicitors involved in land planning who are honestly horrified when every time they see a development sign, they see another sign. Your children will not necessarily be accommodated at the local school. This is disgusting.
Yeah.
It's absolutely disgusting. And the Land Tribunal passes that. They think that's okay. I think a Section 96 judge would have a very different opinion about that. The city doesn't do it. And that's what I'm saying to you as a challenge. You have a lot more power than you choose to use. Let's use it. I know what's happened at the province, but you have levers.
The reality of the relationship, and I think a lot of people assume that our cities have more powers than they do. I often describe cities in Canada as the level of government with the most expectations but the least amount of power. And they say, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And many of us grew up with American movies and believe that we are New York or Chicago or LA. The reality is, unlike those cities that have city charters, or European or other cities in the world that actually have genuine constitutional powers, in Canada, cities don't even exist in the Constitution. They're not even mentioned. Back when cities and provinces, when all the, they're constituted, well, back in 1867, cities were an afterthought. They were created as creatures of the province. And Doug Ford literally could change the name of Toronto to Ford Nation tomorrow.
Oh.
If that's recorded, don't share that with Doug Ford. He might just do it. I digress. But that's why Doug Ford was able to chop the number of councillors in half that, without asking anyone. That's why he's able to meddle around with our planning rules. That's why he's able to do what he does all the time. And so I think the reality is, no matter what you think the city could do, there'd always be a legal reaction by the province to force their hand until we have a provincial government that will actually respect our city. In my view, and I'm not here to be partisan, but my personal honest view is the best thing that we can do to address a number of the different, addressing the social determinants of health, to better planning, to improving our city, is to get rid of this provincial government. And now, what do we need? We need a government that will support our city in ways, including, I believe, to have a city charter. I mentioned this earlier, and what I meant by that is that with a single province amendment, this is not a Meech Lake kind of change. With a single province amendment, in other words, if you have the province and the feds on side, Toronto could actually have more control and power over basic things that cities do around the world: revenue tools, governance, and planning, and actually have a real ability to be not only responsible for what we all value every day that affects our lives, but ultimately more accountable, where we don't say blame the province for everything that happens. In other words, those who you elect as mayor and councillor will both have the ability and the power to deliver for us, but ultimately be accountable for the good things or the bad things they do. And right now, none of it's working. You brought up the commercial parking levy. I mean, that is the reason that the city needs to use that. And yes, with some of those, restrictions to make sure that it doesn't impact little like plazas and things like that, but for the large malls, is because ultimately it's one of the very few ways that the city can bring in revenue. And you're right, we're not literally bankrupt, but we're in trouble. We've started this budget with a $1.8 billion shortfall. We don't have revenue tools that grow with the economy the way that the province and the federal government has. That's one of the reasons that they're gonna make off like bandits off the World Cup games, and we're facing a $300 million hole.
In Birchcliff, where I used to live, in 2003, city wrote a report saying we had a huge sewage problem. In 2010, there was an EA. In 2012 and 2014, there was extensive flooding. In 2020, there was another EA because the first one ran out. That one said in 2020, we needed $330 million worth of sewage work in Birchcliff, little tiny Birchcliff. And the bottom line, it's actually written in the report, there's no reasonable prospect of that work being done. We're bankrupt.
Yes, I would argue that it's also incumbent upon all of us to elect people that don't just tell you what you want to hear and then vote against it at council. And put the resources into getting that project done.
Thank you.
So, I'm hopeful that we will actually, I think it was alluded to earlier, start moving on a number of these projects now that we're having, I think, a more honest conversation with what it takes to actually get it done. But there's gonna have to be many more conversations and frankly, more commitments to getting some of these projects actually to fruition.
And in the next provincial election, we need someone with a platform that comes out black and white, says what you're talking about.
Yes.
So people can make a decision instead of this rhetoric that goes in and smoke and mirrors and we go, what is it now? So stand up and be black and white.
Well, and ultimately, like, don't you find that every provincial election, like all these really substantive, like daily issues that affect our most vulnerable, our communities, the most important issues get distracted by buck a beer or whatever the wedge issue is of the day, and we can't allow that to happen.
The subway has been promised in 2 different elections, and we're still waiting.
So
1986, the EAs, the planning was done, the money was there, as you say, for the LRT, that was taken away. We're still waiting. 2 elections.
My best advice for all of you collectively in Scarborough is, as you are working together and you are putting together a list of your top priorities, make an agreement together and stick together and stick with it together, and then get everybody who's your membership to work with you on this. Agree that no matter what candidate comes to their door, Liberal, Conservative, NDP, Green, or otherwise, you will tell them, you either do these 5 things or else I'm voting for somebody else. And you repeat that, and you repeat that, and you repeat that, in every debate you repeat that, and make it very clear to all those candidates that unless they make those commitments to you, and then go back to the central party and argue that it goes on the platform, they might lose that seat or not gain that seat.
We have,
Good.
Lee had a question. Did you have a question?
I'm gonna challenge all of us as well, because I heard it several times today where we will refer to ourselves in Scarborough as out here. Thanks for coming out here. We're not out here. We're here. We're here. We're here. Yeah. And I think that's just really important for all of us, because language is really important. The other thing is that around the checking off of the boxes and the consultations or lack thereof, it really is a check the box, and I'm going to reiterate it because I have heard, especially with the good folks from Metrogate, where the Delta was turned into a hotel, but it happens all the time in Scarborough here, and I'm sure in other parts of our city, is that we have the answers. Communities like ours have the answers. We live here, so therefore we know the nitty-gritty, and consultations aren't supposed to be just a box, and I'm going to really stress that for you as a member of council, that pushes back often when did meaningful, thoughtful consultation happen with the people who live there, where, this next decision is going to impact the residents of these communities? Because that doesn't happen, and it happened with the coming of the shelters out here, putting the shelters out here in Scarborough, not because there shouldn't be shelters in Scarborough. Of course, there needs to be shelters across our cities to accommodate, people who are struggling with homelessness. But the people in our communities need to be consulted, because we can tell you where the pitfalls are going to be. We can contribute to what the solutions, along with putting shelters out here, and what the supporting services need to be along with the shelters. So meaningful consultation needs to happen. Developers, right? They need to be forced to work with communities, right? They need to be forced to, if you're going to put in an application for a 46-story building, which is what we're facing at our Shepherd location, we're going to be homeless, all right? Because a 46-story condominium that's proposed for where we are doing the work that we do, that developer needs to be forced to work with us and work with the surrounding community to ensure that we aren't dislocated, and that we continue to be part of the conversations that build inclusive, fulsome communities.
They're
Here, not out there, here.
here.
Or down there.
I'm going to offer a couple of examples of challenges that can turn into opportunities if you do it in ways that I know you're alluding to. So first of all, so our area in Midtown Toronto also had a hotel shelter during the pandemic, Roehampton, and
But not 400 people.
it was big though. It was big, and the
Oh, no.
but it was impactful. And the challenge is that, like I was saying earlier, it turned into one of those binary things where you either care about the homeless, or you're a horrible person and you don't. And the reality was, we all had a responsibility to make sure that each of those individuals had a safe place to go, and in that context, with social distancing and all the supports that they needed to be well and healthy and alive. There were, if we're to be honest, consequences of that choice. There were break-ins to local stores, and broken windows, and bikes stolen out of backyards, and real issues that, again, it's not anti or pro, it's just true. It's just that's what was going on. And there were also schools right nearby that just wanted supports from, not to demonize or to sort of create boogeymen out of the clients who were there, but to just say that if there are issues that come up, how are we supported? So we created a committee where we brought all the different leaders in the community together, the schools, the school trustees, everybody together. And bit by bit, we worked on improving the situation. I got all the senior staff involved, and we got resources to provide better supports for the shelter, for the schools, for the community. And what started with hundreds and hundreds of upset emails turned into nothing over a period of time, because we addressed it and we didn't pretend it wasn't happening. And I just believe if you engage the community in a way where it's, as you said, it's not about whether or not we support homeless people who need our help. It's about doing it well, and it's about not consulting about whether or not we're going to help people, but how do we do it in a way that is informed and understands the community, and how even the community can be part of that solution. Then everybody benefits from it, including those who are clients at that shelter. Similarly with the development, I just went through a really controversial issue in the Davisville Village neighborhood in my ward, where it's very, very intensified apartment neighborhood, a lot of challenges with infrastructure, with access to, the subway's overcrowded often in our neck of the woods, but also green space. And one of the developers wanted to infill a space that acted like a park, looked like a park for decades, but in fact was privately owned. So they were able to infill it, and according to the new rules, they can do whatever they want. So what we did is that we engaged the community in what their priority was. Yes, those buildings are going to be approved here or at the tribunal, but what we did is we started working with the developers and the community together, proactively. And we started finding lots that we could acquire in the middle of the community. We said, what is the win? The win was that if they're going to take a little bit of green space, we need more. And ultimately, we were able to approve the developments and then use money from it to then buy a big swath of land that's going to be even a bigger park and a real park in the middle of the neighborhood. So I would argue that the real test, and I would say this to any of the councillors and to the developers and to the planning staff, it's not about the building height, density, or any of that. I mean, that'll be part of the debate. The test is, are they leaving us better than they found us? Are they leaving us better than they found us? Are our streets better? Are our parks better? Is our infrastructure better? Are our services better? Is our quality of life better? And you can only do that by engaging the community.
And excuse me, so we need to wrap up. I know you're on a roll now.
I'm enjoying it.
We are too. But I'm getting the laser eyes over here. But one important thing, I think, just for the whole audience here is every person has a voice. And, you know, we all send a letter off to our councilor or MP, whatever, and you think that's gonna be it. And you think a month later, nothing. You gotta be diligent, you gotta be, if you really are passionate about it, you gotta keep pushing it to make them more accountable. Because what it is, silence is golden to the other end. Oh, they've gone away, thank you very much. Rhoda, I have to use as an example, from Metrolinx, yes.
We're still on it.
And you're on it, and you're still laughing and smiling.
How many hours
Crying
did you
maybe
wait
some
at the
other place, but you're not here.
Oh, God, thank you for that.
You're an example of what we need to
Amazing
do.
for my 3 minutes, and everybody else had 5. Yes.
Oh, but you're an example of what has to go on, and that's where you get to your community groups, which don't get the recognition they deserve because they're volunteers, and you're trying to do what's good, and you're trying to keep the wheels on the bus, so to speak, and it's tough. And you know, when they're saying, well, you need $50,000 to get a lawyer to fight something, we're the shareholders here, and you're telling us what? Like, we need that reversed. And our staff, you know, if they got problems, they got to deal, but as a councillor, you need to ask the questions, right? If nobody asks questions, they just go out of the room. I've been there in the private sector and public. They don't ask questions, start the car, get out of here. But if you start asking them, that's what I've seen a lot from some of the new councillors in Janelle. They're asking questions now, and they're putting them on guard. So they're like, oh, Tanner, and then when we saw him, he was like, he didn't know where the hotel was pretty well. He didn't know what's going on. But that's what you have to do, not to insult them, but to call out, is this person really doing their work? And that's what came out of it. So I think that's a key thing.
Well, with respect to staff, listen, the majority of city staff are truly like good people, professionals, they're experts in their fields. They care deeply about the work they do. There's always been this idea at City Hall, though, that in some way, that if you happen to be a member of city staff, that everything you say or write was on tablets at the top of a mountain and should never be questioned. And the reality is, like any sector of humanity, there will be those who, will work altruistically and be independent and objective, and others who will have either agendas of their own or they're kowtowing to whatever the political pressure is at the moment. And it is our responsibility to ask questions and to challenge when something doesn't add up and make sense. Just as we should congratulate and encourage those who are doing a great job. Yes. And I think that's the best way that we hold each other accountable.
And asking questions is not a bad boy.
It's a good thing.
Or a bad girl.
No.
Respectfully, right?
Yes.
Excuse me, I just not heard anybody say anything, somebody mentioned earlier about the commercial parking, and whether you pro or con on that, are you aware that it was done 35 years ago? Commercial concentration tax?
No.
CCT? And it was done, and it was, a lot of lawyers made money with it, and that's okay, because there was because of it. You need to actually do some research on it. I was around when that happened. Happy to talk to you about it.
Okay.
And anyway.
Thank you.
Good point, good point. Okay, folks, we're gonna wrap up, and we're gonna be on time.
Thank you.
Well, I want to recognize the groups. Warden Station's here, CD Farquharson, Scarborough Junction was here, Pleasant View, PGC Riders, Agincourt Village, Scarborough North Ward, area people like that, all the folks that are here presenting today from all different demographics, the whole bit. This is what it's all about. So I want to thank Lee for providing this facility, which is great. We need these opportunities for that. Rhoda, who's also a co-founder of S.U.N, and obviously a strong leader in Agincourt for the voice, and that rubs off on a lot of people. So, you know, when things are good, you want to jump on that bandwagon, right? When it's bad, I'm off at the next stop. Filip Cruz for doing the volunteering here on the filming and that, we appreciate that. And all the Scarborough leaders that we've been connected to. There's still some out there that get emails and do stuff but haven't seen them face to face, so I'm hoping that this will bring us together even more, to that each ward will now have consistency where they can talk to the councillors. Not to beat you up, not to throw you out, but to be accountable and say, here's some ideas. And not, like my boss always said, don't come with problems or you're out of here. We should bring a recommendation, a solution or something, at least to work with, right? And that's, if we do that, we're not the whiners, we're not the NIMBYs. We all know this is what we want, and we know it's gonna happen. How can it happen? So that's all the great stuff there. And if that's it for everyone, and then there will be a
By the
recording
way,
sent in.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not possible that anyone here, everyone here, right? So these things don't happen with one person, and you know that. So your support's very good, and we appreciate it. And we'll see you in council.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.